Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, sexy horror. I've got 3 trashy, sexy horror novels to talk to you about. This is of course part of my ongoing Countdown to GarbAugust series, so this is the penultimate episode, one more episode to go, and then we will be into GarbAugust. And I cannot wait to be able to say Happy GarbAugust to all of you when the month of August starts. So I've got 3 horror books to talk about today, all with a bit of a sexy spin to them. So we've got The Searing by John Coyne, Tender Loving Care by Andrew Neiderman, and Slither by Edward Lee. So these were all, in their own way, a hoot. They were all just A, completely trashy, but B, quite enjoyable. And I think in many ways not deliberately enjoyable. So I'm going to talk briefly about all 3 of them. I'm not going to do like massively in-depth reviews of any of them because I don't think any of them deserve that. But I'll talk about them anyway in the order that I read them. So first up, Tender Loving Care by Andrew Neiderman, which I think was from 1984. So Neiderman is probably best known nowadays as V.C. Andrews, in that he is the person who's written all of the V.C. Andrews books that were published since V.C. Andrews died, which was quite a long time ago. So the vast majority of books with V.C. Andrews on the cover are actually written by Andrew Neiderman. So this is kind of it definitely falls within the horror genre, but it's kind of psychological horror. Let me read the blurb on the back, because the blurb is fantastic and gives you an idea of the kind of vibe the book is going for. Michael really loved his wife, but after the tragic accident to their little daughter, Miriam was untouchable, like a dream. Desperately hoping for his living nightmare to end, Michael hires a nurse to care for her. But though Nurse Randolph's powerful presence does wonders for Miriam, the nurse's sinister yet erotic dominance over Michael begins to fill him with a strange shuddering sense of doom, and nothing can make the terror disappear, not even tender loving care. So yeah, basically the premise here is there's this family with a young daughter. There's been an accident, which has left the daughter incapacitated. The wife is also being terribly affected by this accident and is suffering from a kind of depression where she's retreated into herself. Michael, the hero of the book, hires a nurse, Nurse Randolph, to come and live with the family to look after both the daughter and the wife. And as things progress, you realise fairly quickly that things are not quite what they seem with the apparent domestic setup. And then there's all this stuff which almost at times feels completely incidental to the main plot about this nurse, caring for the wife and daughter. There's all this weird stuff where she's basically trying to seduce him. She does yoga in the nude, and encourages to come to her room at that point and stuff. And there's a real kind of build up of sexiness really in the book until the point where they actually do the deed, which was in sharp contrast to Slither, which I'll talk about a bit later. But actually it was reasonably effective in terms of that kind of simmering passion style of thing, which is wonderfully trashy. I love that kind of, it's very melodramatic. And it ends up being this really, really crazy psychodrama where you gradually realise, that what you thought was happening is not happening at all. And the end is just so ludicrously over the top. It was quite hilarious. I'm not going to tell you how, but the cover of this UK edition pretty much completely spoils the ending of the book. I won't say how, but it's one of the most jaw-droppingly spoilery covers I've ever seen. But yeah, Neiderman is definitely a very trashy writer. There's all sorts of over-the-top sex in this book. There's all sorts of kind of weird pop psychology, but it was really, really entertaining in a kind of trashy TV movie, but with a bit more sex kind of a way. Slither by Edward Lee, which I read next, was probably even trashier. So I've never read any Edward Lee books before, but I have read a lot of Richard Layman, and I've talked about Richard Layman on the channel. This book, I think, was like Richard Layman, but even trashier. It was just bonkers. So it's about, as you might be able to tell from the cover, it's about sex worms. So it's about this island where there are these weird, like, worm creatures that basically infect people and make the people really randy. And the worms also kind of slither around and, you know, and get under people's skin, and it's just a really, really gross book. Basically, the first line to give you a sense of it. This is the first line of the book. I won't bother reading you the blurb. Let me just read you the first line. When Carol noticed the 2 black ticks attached to her nipples, she very understandably screamed. Basically, this whole book is all of the female characters being topless most of the time, all of the male characters ogling the female characters' breasts, and then lots of worms infecting people and making people randy and just being gross and disgusting, basically. There's also some fairly long, fairly boring scientific scenes where there's various groups of characters on this island. So there's like this kind of redneck group who are like really like trashy and no rent. There's a group of scientists who are investigating the worms. There's these mysterious kind of military types, and then there's this group of young people at the start who have gone there for kind of spring break to hang out. They get killed off fairly quickly. But yeah, the other characters all kind of interact with the worms and eventually with each other. But the scientist characters, there's these really lengthy bits, like the bits you get in like a bad 50s kind of horror movie, where the scientists are kind of doing science and, you know, using lots of long words and stuff like that. And it just goes on and on and on. It gets a bit boring. It did feel like, so Greg from Another Bibliophile Reads said that he felt like that Leisure Books, who published this, had like a page count that their authors had to hit, and that Edward Lee was put a lot of padding into this book in order to hit that page count. And I definitely think that's true. So yeah, bits of it were quite boring. But the bits that were gross and disgusting were fantastic. It's not sexy at all, I would say, despite so there's this weird thing of like, which feels like a very Richard Layman thing, of the female characters, you know, not having many clothes on for much of the book. And that's the kind of thing, this might sound awful, that's the kind of thing, if it was a movie, I could totally get that. And I might even be behind that. But in a book, it just seems a bit odd. I don't know. Yeah, so it was a very trashy book. And it's got a completely bonkers ending. Much like the fact that Tender Loving Care had a bonkers ending, the Searing also has a bonkers ending. And in fact, the ending of the Searing is in many ways similar to the ending of Slither. So yeah, let me get on to the Searing. So this was perhaps even trashier than the other 2 books. This is, I think, reasonably well known because it's just so trashy. So it's about this small town or village in the States, which is there's like a new housing development there, and there's various people that live there, and the village finds itself inflicted with this weird plague of children dying in unexplained ways. So it starts off with the death of an infant. And then the women of the town experiencing spontaneous orgasms, which they can't explain. And basically, the book is about, you know, all of that stuff happening, and the people of the town, and in particular, like the main characters of the book, one of whom is one of the women who keeps on spontaneously having orgasms, trying to figure out what's going on. And it's just so trashy, and the end is so the way John Coyne takes it at the end is just so completely ridiculous. If the book wasn't ridiculous enough already, it gets even more ridiculous towards the end. But there are just some fantastic lines in here, which again, like Slither, reminded me of trying to kind of trashy 50s B movies. For instance, lines of dialogues like this. I'm just saying there might be a connection between the orgasms and the deaths. Or what was the Oh yeah, and so this isn't much of a spoiler. It may be a very slight spoiler, but I don't think it is really. There's this utterly bizarre scene towards the end of the book, which I did not understand at all, to the extent that I had to Google the phrase, do human brains smell like shit? Let me explain why. So there's a scene towards the end of the book where like all sorts of crazy stuff is going down, and this guy is going into this house and he smells excrement. There's this overpowering smell of excrement in the house, and he's searching around trying to figure out what's gone on, and eventually finds this corpse, which is, you know, someone who has been murdered and their skull has been smashed open, and he realizes that what he can smell is not excrement but the person's brains. So I googled it, and I'm going to have to remember to go back and delete that from my search history. But yeah, apparently brains don't actually smell of anything, and certainly don't smell of shit. So why that scene was included in this book, I do not know. But it was very strange indeed. Okay, time for that moment when I pluck a random book from the shelves. So today I have Broken Monsters by Lauren Bukes. So this is another one that I've had for ages and I haven't read. So I read Lauren Bukes' first book, The Shining Girls, which I liked but didn't love. I thought parts of it were excellent, and parts of it I just couldn't get into. This is one I picked up in a charity shop, I think after I'd got The Shining Girls, but before I read it. And maybe that's why I haven't read it yet, because yeah, The Shining Girls let me down in a few places. But people have told me that this is better. So I am interested in reading it at some point. I've subsequently read her more recent novel, which I now completely forget the title of. So if you know it, put it in the comments. But it's like her kind of gender apocalypse book where, is it men or women? I think all the men in the world have been wiped out. Or most of them have anyway, and there's just women around. And I like that. I thought that was pretty good. But yeah, still haven't got to this one. So yeah, 3 very trashy and slightly sexy horror novels for you there. All of which made me wonder what kind of relationship the authors of them had with sex, because none of them seem to have a particularly healthy relationship with sex. But yeah, some strange, trashy, sexy stuff going on there. So yeah, let me know if you've read any of these. Yeah, as always, thank you very much for watching. Not long now till GarbAugust, so I hope you are looking forward to it as much as I am. But yeah, I hope you're safe and well. I hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.